Right. Our fantastic technical crew turned 5 minutes into 30 seconds. Well done. Thank you for coming to Cinema Café. My name is John Nine. I'm one of the senior programmers here at the festival. Encourage you to take a look at the rest of our program. We have some great events for the rest of the festival. Tomorrow we have LA Food Critics Pulitzer Prize winning food critic Jonathan Gold talking to Academy Award winner Morgan Neville. Check out the rest of the program. We're here until Sunday. You might notice we only have 2 seats today. We had planned to have Doug Aiken, whose film Station to Station is in the New Frontier program. Unfortunately, he's quite ill this morning and probably would not be able to sit on the chair. So he will not be here. However, you know, the conception of Cinema Café has always been for you, the audience, to be able to talk and engage with the filmmakers at the festival. So this is your chance to engage with, I think, one of the great filmmakers of our era. Guy Maddin has had many films, well, both at Sundance and beyond. My Winnipeg, Saddest Music in the World, Brand Upon the Brain, which I think is truly one of the great film-going experiences I've ever had. And he's here in the festival this year with Forbidden Room. His work as an artist in many, many media is, I think, part of what pushes his cinematic form and has made him truly one of the most distinctive filmmakers working today. So we thank Doug for coming. Moderating our conversation today, Dennis Scholl, who is an avid art collector, a cinephile. He is the Vice President of Arts at the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. He's also a visiting scholar at MIT's Media Lab, and really did his work in preparing for this. So I thank you for leading this conversation, and I will give it to you, Dennis.
Thanks very much, John. I've spent the last week preparing a beautiful alternate question set between Doug and Guy. So if I say the word Doug once or twice, just forgive me ahead of time. I know I'm going to do it, so I just want to put it out there. But we will talk about Guy's film, and I think that what stood out to me, because I knew Doug's work very well. I had, being an art collector, had spent time with Doug, owned his work, et cetera. But Guy's work was not so familiar to me, so I've spent the last week watching Guy Maddin films.
I'm very sorry.
I'm a little frightened.
Yeah.
And I think that what his films are about for me, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to specifically focus on the Forbidden Room, but it's about taking a journey. And I was reading some of the write-ups of the film, you know, after it debuted here, and I was thinking to myself that in Doug's case, Station to Station was really about a train journey, and a number of the reviews of Guy's film called it a hallucinogenic journey. So, but in each case, you know, in this case, you have to just let go and take the ride. It really is something that is required.
Absolutely. And I might add that you guys may feel shortchanged not getting Doug, but I had a long breakfast with Doug this morning, and we talked a lot, and I got along with him really well, and I really adore the guy. And we had not seen each other's work at all, and it was a real relief to me to hear that he hadn't seen my work because I hadn't seen his. And then we just started having our own panel, and we talked for about an hour. So the panel did happen, trust me, and it was great. But just toward the end, a lot of little beads of sweat started forming on his upper lip, and his complexion got transparent, actually. And then, you know, I had sort of joked with him that I didn't know what to say on a panel, and that a hypnotist had once given me the post-hypnotic suggestion that every time I heard the word panel, I would fall asleep. And I have fallen asleep on panels, but this is...
I'm feeling really good about this right now.
But
just
this is,
so you know.
no, I'm staying wide awake now because it's more of a conversation. So we had a conversation, Doug and I, and it was great. You should have been there. And now we're having a conversation.
Fair enough.
And I'm awake. And yeah, thank you for putting it that way, because I've been asked to describe this picture, which has showed in public only once now. Its world premiere was the other day at the library. And my co-director, Evan Johnson, and I, my team, production designer Galen, my screenwriting colleague, Bob Kotick, Galen Johnson and Bob Kotick are all here. None of us really knew what we'd made because we were happy with it, but you're making something to be consumed by others, and we wanted to find out what we'd made. So we watched it, and that was amazing. And it's not pleasant to go through that, but now I know better. But I still, in all the interviews that my wonderful publicist arranged for us to do yesterday, was quite often asked to describe what the movie is, especially the people that hadn't seen the movie. And man, I'm still stymied. So just to call it a journey, where you kind of just let yourself go and let things wash upon you, wave upon wave. I think one of the reasons, since Doug and I didn't know each other's work, we tried to figure out why we were being paired, and we sort of figured out that his picture had a lot of sub-compartments within it, each one a minute long.
If you didn't like it, you waited a minute and you got something else.
Yeah. And our picture, The Forbidden Room, is similarly compartmentalized into many narratives that are organized completely along different lines than Doug's, but there is that. Then we both have, in his case, a huge gallery and museum and intervention career behind him. I'm just starting to get into the gallery world. The Forbidden Room was shot in public, in museums, in the Centre Pompidou in Paris for 3 weeks, and in the Centre Phi, the Phi Center in Montreal for another 2.5 weeks. And so we both straddle the film and museum world, and our films are unconventionally structured and things like that. But anyway, that's enough for now. Next.
I want to go to something you've said. I do have something else I want to talk about, but you got to shoot at the Pompidou for 3 weeks. A, how does somebody get to do that? And B, what was that like? That's not exactly the chillest place in the world every day. It's pretty busy.
No, it was odd. I was extremely lucky to get to shoot in the Pompidou, and it happened quickly. I'm used to the museum world moving very slowly. But I was in Paris with a show called My Winnipeg, which was a bunch of Winnipeg-based artists had got a show, and they at La Maison Rouge, which is a really nice gallery there. And while I was in town with all these Winnipeg artists, I had developed a relationship with the film curators at the Centre Pompidou. They'd thrown a retrospective for my work just the previous year, and so I just made a cold call to them and said, I'd like to shoot as an installation. I'd like to make a movie set, an installation in your museum. Is that even possible? And they said, the whole meeting took less than 3 minutes. They said, yeah, we've got a 3-week slot coming up in a few months. You can do it.
The lesson is you can't win if you don't bet, I think is the lesson.
Yeah, but it was a cold call. It was unbelievable. I felt like the world's luckiest life insurance salesman or vacuum cleaner salesman or something. I just knocked on the door. Hello? Is the lady of the house in or something? And next thing I know, I got a show. And I had such a horrible, smug look on my face when I went back to all the other Winnipeg artists. And I tried to keep it a secret, my lucky stroke. I tried to keep it a secret for about 3 seconds, and then I decided just to try to ruin their day as much as possible.
Okay. So you show up at the Pompidou, and you've got a crew, and where do they put you? And are you shooting at night when nobody's there?
No. We're shooting in public. We built a set that was, maybe 4 times the size of this stage area. And then people watched from even closer than you guys are watching me now. And then the set was open on one end, some sort of sexploitation picture about a guy possessed by the spirit of Mark Twain visiting the 1974 Miss Nude World pageant. Really wanted to adapt.
I think that one's worth remaking.
Let's
take a shot at that.
Let's just shake hands on that one now. I'll make it for you. You can own it. And,
those that know me know that I'm going to deliver on that promise.
Your first piece by me. Just the further Evan and I, and then later Bob Kotick and Galen and I started exploring this world, the more excited we got. And we got quite ghoulish whenever a film would turn up in New Zealand inevitably. We'd be disappointed because it'd be one less film we could remake. You know, you should be excited that a lost film's been found, but we were getting really ghoulish about it. But anyway, we started adapting them. But then at one point we decided that a lot of these should really be fit together in this really Baroque and explosive way into one big narrative. And so as you shift, we were kind of inspired by the great eccentric French writer from the early, from the 20s and 30s and earlier in France, Raymond Roussel, who made a writing career out of writing plays, poems, stories, novels, concerning stories nested within stories, Russian doll style. And the great American poet John Ashbery learned how to read and speak French in the late 50s so that he could read Roussel, and then has spent years translating him. And John Ashbery wrote his own adaptation of a lost Dwayne Esper. He's another exploitation filmmaker who made How to Undress in Front of Your Husband and distributed Reefer Madness and Freaks and things like that. But he made a film called How to Take a Bath, and it was lost, and John Ashbery wrote his version, and we used it as a framing device for our movie, and then started nesting movies within movies. And Evan and Galen made sure the palettes, as color timer and production designer respectively, made sure the palettes of each movie were radically different so that the colors kind of keep exploding like an omelet with all the ingredients possible in it. And so your retinas get a real workout watching this thing.
So for those of you that haven't seen the film, I made a few notes, and so I took away from the film, it might be described as a woodsman's effort to save a fair maiden. But there are a few detours along the way. Okay, there's a lot of detours along the way.
Yeah.
There's a doomed submarine. There's a manacled gardener. There are humanoid wolves. There are unitard skeletons. Love the unitards, by the way. That was very strong. And the aforementioned very specific how-to segment on how to take a bath.
Yes.
So let me ask the hardest question I'm going to ask today, and the one I'm the most nervous about. Was it okay for me to be confused a lot while I was watching the film?
Well, we wrote each section with narrative clarity in mind, but we knew that the viewers would be forced to shift gears a lot, and that a trap door would open up beneath them frequently and drop them to the next narrative layer. And so that's why we worked extra hard on making sure that each narrative, self-contained narrative, was crystal clear. But there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. But it's really nice. One of the pleasures I get out of watching my own movie, and I don't get many, because you just become a nervous wreck, especially at a premiere. But I love working your way into the next narrative. That's one thing. You just know, okay, I'm in the next narrative. Now I'm in another narrative, and now I've already lost track how many narratives deep I'm in. But working your way back out is really pleasing because you're reminded, oh yeah, that's where I am, and then, oh yeah, that's where I am. And it's really refreshing that you've, to realize just how deep into a series of concentric stories you've worked. And it's just simply constructed. Like, we all bought Robert McKee's, How to Write a Screenplay book, and structured it in a 3-act structure. So there's little, 3 Russian dolls, one of them 6 narratives deep, then another 9, and then another 9, and then a bunch of climaxes at the end. So it's easy as pie. On a 10th viewing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back.
I'm counting on everyone to see it 10 times before, passing judgment.
What is it about this era? I'm not hot. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. What is it about this era that compels you, and why is it a preferred way of storytelling for you in terms of this kind of edge of the silent and talkie era? What I
loved about the part talkie was, a lot of films were made as silent films, and then studios shelved them when talkies came in, and then often realized, hey, we can exploit our assets that are just sitting on the shelves if we go back in and shoot 1 or 2 scenes with a musical number or a little bit of dialogue. And those movies became known as goat glands, named after a then popular surgical procedure of that men use to treat impotence or just erectile dysfunction by having goat or monkey glands installed somewhere in their abdomens. I think maybe doctors are performing a little sleight of hand and throwing the goat gland into the medical refuse bin, but these movies were rejuvenated the same way, or the idea was they'd be rejuvenated. It was basically a placebo. And what excited me about them was that the same reason I mentioned earlier, they're a hybrid of silent and talking pictures. They have the best of both. And most people view 1929, the year of the goat gland, as the worst year in cinema history. But for me, it's the most exciting because it just represents the attitude that you just keep all the... Why? In its short run down the road, the film industry has discarded so many perfectly good working vocabulary units in its industrial haste, and I've just had all the time in the world to stroll down that highway and just pick up these things and repurpose them. And it's
With a lot of joy.
Tons of joy, and it's fun, and you feel mischievous, and you can almost take credit for inventing them because there's a lot of things that are just forgotten, and they still feel new and fresh. You know how when you look at German expressionist cinema, it still seems modern, and so all these things still seem modern to me. And sure, it seems even when I make a picture that's 100% talking, as I've done in full color, there's still, the reviewers will still describe them as silent movies. I think it's because my way into understanding narrative, whether it's literature or watching a movie, is I always try figuring things out by entering it through the work of art, through the fairy tale door, and then getting my bearings and deciding then whether it's a fairy tale or not or whatever. But when writing the stories, you're dealing with silent, we treat characters the way silent movie screenwriters would, as more like types. You gotta have a quick type, and then we have them interact, and then you start nipple tweaking, trying to do something both modernist or postmodern or just savvy, just something 2015 as opposed. So not only are the movies conspicuously modern because they're so conspicuously digital, but there's something I like about that era because silent film takes one giant step toward the fairy tale, toward the mannered. It enables you to prettify the language, engorge it, heighten it. It enables you to take human truths that we all vaguely understand about ourselves, and it just uninhibits them. Good melodrama is the truth uninhibited, not exaggerated, but uninhibited. When you exaggerate the truth, you make it untrue. But when you uninhibit it, the way fairy tales do, you make it you make the truth more apparent. And so I like what good silent films could do that way, just like good fairy tales, just like what opera or painting or whatever songs can do. And so I like working in that stuff. Opera for sure.
I think opera is a perfect reference point for this.
Absolutely. I've often described my movies by way of helping people in as opera without singing. You know.
So you noted during the Q&A when the film had its premiere that there's no film this year at this year's film festival.
Yeah, apparently one 16mm film, very
good. No
good.
35s,
no.
No. And of course there's a lot of nostalgia for film, but you shot this all on digital and did everything in post. I know you don't like to talk about process that much, but could you just touch on that? Does film matter anymore when you can do what you do with the digital unit? I mean, does it, it's so handcrafted, it feels like.
Yeah, thanks. It's all what you do with what you got. I don't know. I'll leave it for other people to say whether film matters or not. Obviously, there's people that feel really strongly about it. Paul Thomas Anderson shoots in 70mm. Quentin Tarantino cares enough about film that he's bought a theater and shows only film. And I've been to the theater and I've enjoyed myself. And I love watching the film he projects, and especially the trailers. Holy smokes! But for my purposes, I've always worked in Winnipeg, which meant sending the film out to a lab in Toronto and waiting an agonizing week for it to come back to see if it was even a picture there at all. And I like working digitally. There's when Evan, my co-director, is manipulating the images. He could do the same manipulations to film, but there'd be this unnecessary, costly film step in there. And it's, for our purposes, it's a digital project, and part of it is going to sit on the internet, which is digital.
Yeah.
And then so it's just, I don't even think of film anymore.
Make sure you see the title sequence too in the beginning, because that was the thing that really blew me away. It just
Galen is kind of our
changing.
Saul Bass. He made the music. He edited. He made the title sequence, and it's very filmic. It just looks like film emulsion blooming and blooming and blooming over and over again with different chemical colors from the various from the history of film decay, and it's really beautiful and dynamic.
Now, this one was a long time coming. Can you talk about how long it took you to, from conception to
We started
completion?
working on it about 4.5 years ago, and I'm used to a film taking about a year from start to finish. Sometimes a little longer, but and sometimes even a little less. But this one was longer because it took a little while. It was more of an organic or a composting, a settling in what it was going to be. We started off very optimistically that we'd be able to make an internet interactive, and then we added a feature project to it. And then you also can't finance new media, the internet stuff, as easily as you can finance film, in Canada anyway, when you're relying on accessing government money. And there's a real system that works in boilerplate fashion for Canadian filmmakers if you're in the good books of the state. But when you try to make all these wonderfully lubricated and bureaucrats, when you try to force them to bend to fit new media, even though everyone claims they want to embrace new media and they know that that's part of the future of maybe the entirety of their future as a funding body, but they still have their rules, and so we got bogged down in financing troubles. Plus, shooting in public spaces, the Pompidou thing fell into place quickly, but some other places were more typically slow, like institutions tend to be. And so there was a lot of waiting to see if we were going to go into places or not, and some of them fell through, and some of them we didn't have money for, and some of them were in countries that Canada didn't have co-production agreements with, so it just proved to be heartbreakingly impossible. So it just took longer.
Did that extended gestation period, though, did it add something to the film? Did it change the film in your mind?
Well, it just kind of broke us, spirit and body, but I think we did need to think about what it was exactly, and we're still thinking about it a bit. Especially the interactive part, which will come out later this year and is sponsored by the National Film Board of Canada, which is really doing groundbreaking interactive work. They're amazing, and they've been really supportive, and we've had a number of think tanks in various parts of the continent where they invite people from other fields all together, and we have to discuss and justify our aspirations and hopes, and then we end up emerging from them after a week, sort of staggering out of them with a better understanding of what it is we'd hope to do and what we should do and things like that. So we've needed the time, frankly. When we just blithely started this project, naively, we figured it would take 1.5 years or something. It's just taken longer, that's all. But it's really turning into something that I'm super proud of.
Yeah. And you've alluded to it, but can you talk a little bit about how this film will relate to the interactive project, which is called Seances, I believe?
The interactive project, Seances, just, I guess, I was just struck during a visit to Paris when I wanted to see a movie in a theater that the seatings, like the 7 o'clock and the 9 o'clock seatings, were called seances. And we here in North America think of seances as paranormal seatings in the dark. But the word seance just means a seating, and so in France it means a seating in the dark to watch something projected, something that's no longer there but is recorded and projected. There's a medium, a director, or a projectionist or something. And then the paranormal seance is kind of the same thing, a bunch of people hoping to see something, hoping to believe in something that's not really there. We'll sit down in the dark. When the lights go on, they want to believe in what they see. When the lights go on, they go home, they discuss among themselves just how enchanted they were, whether they bought anything or not, and whether the medium was a charlatan or not. I think in both cases, the director and the bejeweled turban-wearing medium, they're both mountebanks, charlatans, frauds, And so basically a paranormal seance and a movie seance are the same thing. So I had all these lost movies that I wanted to see, and I just started thinking of them as films with no known final resting place. And that reminded me of sad spirits wandering the landscape of film history, unable to project themselves for people. And I thought the only way of ever seeing these movies that would be projected by these sad spirits is if I made them myself. But it occurred to me with this word seance that if I gathered around a table, and this is what I did at the Centre Pompidou and the Phi Center, gathered actors around a table, put them into a trance. It's very easy to put an actor into a trance. Sometimes just brushing up against them, they sort of go into a trance. And then invite the spirit of a lost film to enter their bodies, compel them to act out the long-forgotten plots of a lost film that day. And then, as a spirit photographer, just shoot it. So Ben Kasulke, who was here earlier, my DOP for life, I hope, and I would just suck up the images with our little dust busters. And then John Gerdebeck, my editor, would cut them together, and we'd have spirit photographed lost movies.
So before we go to the audience, I want to ask you one last question, because it's the thing I also struggled with, and that is that you embrace melodrama, and yet
Absolutely.
we as a society
Are
tend to
uncomfortable
be,
with it, yeah.
really uncomfortable. I mean,
Embarrassed by it.
except for reality TV, which we embrace willingly. But setting that aside,
What could be more melodramatic than reality
Exactly.
TV? It seems like, well, since my working definition of melodrama is just the truth uninhibited, you're not allowed to, if you see someone you lust after, a total stranger, you're not allowed just to grab him or her and have your way.
except in the film, the guy with the
Well, exactly, except in film. If you see someone you hate, you're not allowed to clock them one. If you, if you're jealous of your brother, you're not allowed to smite him with a stone, Maybe in your dreams you get to uninhibit some of these repressed feelings, repressed by civilization, repressed by police officers, repressed by good taste sometimes, but nonetheless repressed. But in melodrama, you're allowed to sleep with your mother and poke your eyes out and kill your father, and
all of which happen in this film, pretty
yeah,
much.
exactly. And well, it happens in literature, and it happens in all films. And you've got to compress an entire life into a watchable, finite amount of time. And so there have to be heightenings, which, if they're to be kept honest, the heightenings are usually uninhibitings of the truth rather than exaggerations. Because once you take the truth and exaggerate parts of it, you're actually making it less truthful. So you can take all the suppressed things and just make them more apparent by uninhibiting them for the audience. So if that's the definition of melodrama, I'm all for it. And I think we're all for it without realizing it. It's just that when real pure melodrama usually comes with mannered, uninhibited performance as well, and plots with a lot of coincidences which close in on each other to enable a story to be told more quickly. And a lot of people are made uncomfortable by performances that aren't realistic. They think they want realistic performances. If you want that, watch a security camera sometime. Or just watch each other in here. I don't know. Break up and watch yourselves. I don't know. No, it's in the artist's hand to decide what degree of mannerism to engorge a performance with. We think we're watching, in 2015 when we watch a drama, if we're pleased, we're usually pretty much convinced we're watching something that represents realism. But give it 20 or 30 years, just when you watch a movie from the 60s now or something, and you realize how stylized the performances are, or the 50s, the dramas that passed as realistic, or the 40s or whatever. Each era has its own kind of determined by all of us, all the people, us hoi polloi, all decide what passes for realism, and then as time passes, we realize it's not so realistic. It's about as realistic as a fairy tale, which means if it's good, it's psychologically realistic, but on the surface, no more realistic than a tapestry or a song or anything else.
Well, we're going to take some time now and take some audience questions. If you have a question, raise your hand, and please wait for the mic. There are folks with a mic in the fourth row in the center aisle, please. Somebody just raise their hand. Right there. Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Don. I wanted to know, well, I have a bunch of questions, but I'll wait, ask two and then go around. The first one is, if you wouldn't mind answering, what camera did you shoot on, and what type of lighting did you use for the film we saw?
Oh, okay. That was shot in Montreal, where we're using a couple of Black Magic cameras. That's all I know. Mine was pretty pared down because I like just to hand hold my camera, and the other person who was shooting was the DOP, and she had a big. She had the Black Magic rigged out with all sorts of things, and she had a bunch of camera assistants. So she sort of resembled a woman walking around with an air conditioner on her back, but. It was the same camera, though, but just hers had more bells and whistles on it. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry?
The second question was,
What type of lighting?
Oh, it's nothing special. Movie lighting. I like lots of chiaroscuro and shadows and things. So. Oh yeah, you need the mic.
Different types of coloring effects that you don't see in a normal.
Right, you're saying the color looks different.
Yes.
Well, that's part of our sort of secret recipe, but we just shot raw video, and then Evan, my co-director, fixed it up because it was dispiritingly ugly to look at. In the viewfinder, it was like watching a security camera, but with a lot of actors mincing around on the security camera. So it really needed, that's just filmmaking now, needed a lot of work after. And we carefully planned out the various palettes for each section of the movie, and then Evan executed.
And the gentleman with the hat, please. Just wait for the mic. Thanks.
Having your film screened in both theatrical and art gallery settings, how does that shape your work in production and post-production?
Yeah, it's not like this film will just play in an art. Well, they play in art galleries because art galleries usually have a theater. I made an early movie, my first foray into installations, called Cowards Bend the Knee, and it was designed from the very beginning, before I even started writing the script, to be viewed through peepholes. As a kid, I spent a lot of time drilling holes in walls and spying on people and stuff. And as an adult, I realized it was time I sort of turned the tables on myself and put in the most lurid autobiography on film possible, and then projected it on the other side of peepholes and let people spy on me for a while. Unfortunately, due to a quirk in the gallery air conditioning systems, whoever put their eye up to this hole in the gyprock was treated to an eyeball dehydrating blast of wind, complete with particles of gyprock. And I saw a lot of hemorrhaged eyeballs, sort of squeezed together with hands pressed deeply into the face, staggering out of and so I finally just went to a single channel, and Zeitgeist distributed it as a DVD, and it felt good to go to screenings there. So I've had an uneasy relationship at first with galleries, but I guess the most comfortable I've gotten in galleries is where it's the actual making of the movie has taken place there. And then if I could figure out a way for the interactive to sit in galleries, whether it's me personally conducting seances with lost spirits and then showing the interactive, it might be something like that. It's in other words, to be determined.
Okay. Gentleman up front.
Hi. You were saying that when you were making the film, you didn't necessarily know how audiences would react to it. You just knew that you liked it. I was curious if at the premiere, how did you feel about the audience reaction? Were there moments that surprised you how they responded to moments in the film?
I was pretty pleased. There was a sound issue with our hard drive that was driving me crazy, so there was no way I was going to enjoy myself anyway, but most people didn't notice it or wouldn't have would have thought it was intentional or something anyway. But I was thrilled that people seemed to be audibly reacting, and just, I'm a laugh slut. I like to hear laughter. And so early on, people were really engaged. And then pretty quickly, the ethos of the picture started weeding out people, and people started, walking out, running out, crawling out, just getting themselves out of there, if they didn't want to be there. But that neither surprised me nor concerned me. I've long ago realized that even if my wildest dreams came true, I'd still only be for a certain demographic. That was why I was interested in getting involved in the internet. I thought I could find my demographic, almost every member of my demographic, eventually through the internet. No, I was thrilled. But other than, like I said, I was in agony. But everything's been fixed for tonight's screening in Salt Lake City, so I'm thrilled. So tonight's, I don't know, we'll just see. It's a little bit different in each city. Sometimes there's an awakeness in a room. It depends on what everyone had for lunch sometimes, like how sleepy people are. But I feel there's a little something for almost everybody in my demographic in this picture. So I feel okay about it. I think I don't need to see it too many more times. Usually once or twice per movie is enough. I remember reading in Buñuel's autobiography that he only watched his movies once and then never again. I didn't believe him. I read that long before I'd ever started making my own movies, but now I believe him. It's like you're just punishing yourself by going too often. You quickly know what you've made and what's working, what isn't, and you don't need to learn that over and over and over again. So I was pleased.
I want to say that we were back in the green room talking, and we were talking about the screening, and Guy said, yeah, some people left. He said, just not for them. The power of his craft, he just, he makes these films because he has to. And I think that is a really powerful statement when you go to a screening like that and you do see somebody get up and leave. Instead of agonizing over that, you're making these films because you have to make them. And I got such a great feeling of what it is to be an artist from hearing you say that back there.
Thanks.
It's really joyful.
Yeah, I can't say I always enjoyed watching people walk out when but I've learned.
We get uncomfortable with melodrama.
Yeah, that's right. They're just uncomfortable with melodrama. Right. Well, some of them are comfortable with melodrama, just hate my movie, but no, I don't know. But no, it's fine now. I was a bit shocked, actually, at how little it bothered me. I finally arrived at that spot, so I'm cool with it.
Good. Yes, please. Wait for the mic. Thanks.
Considering that you shot in sort of a public setting, what are some challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
Geez, there are almost no challenges. We felt obliged to move more quickly, I think, which I really liked, because I remember my very first impression of visiting a movie set was how horribly boring it was and how slow-moving it was and how you couldn't tell who the director was even, and that the person who was talking like the director was, I realize now, the first assistant director, but you never saw, and you couldn't tell which of the thousands of people working on the movie was actually the star. I don't know, it was just, you couldn't tell anything, and so I vowed to keep the crew skeletal, which we could only afford anyway, and also to keep things moving, and when a set had to be switched around, to do it quickly, and well, first of all, we had short days, but we just wanted to keep, I was a little bit saddened whenever I looked and there were few people watching, because they were bored, and so I tried to just keep things moving, and that's why, one of the reasons why I wanted to shoot in public. I remember thinking that it would make me do a better job somehow, that I would be putting on a show. But like a participant in a reality show, I quickly forgot they were there. I quickly forgot some of them had cameras. I quickly forgot about those cameras. But every now and then in Paris, there was also, people could watch from floor levels, and they could also watch from above. There was a balcony on 3 sides above, and sometimes people would drop gum wrappers or chewed gum or sandwiches or things down, and popcorn. That was kind of fun, some of it remains in the film, just food raining down on people. And it was kind of fun. I don't know. And then every now and then, like when you're shooting something really boring that you just needed to shoot it, everyone would go away except for 2 really alarmingly persistent people who would just stare at you the whole time, and you'd begin to wonder. But other than just worrying about walking home at night, there were no real challenges. So it was kind of a thrill, actually. And sometimes friends would come down, people who just happened to be passing through Paris. You know, my daughter's half-brother came through, and, you know, when I took a break and shooting for a few seconds to think, he came in on set and shook my hand. It was really nice, actually, just having, you know, you didn't get lonely ever. It was kind of fun. There's almost no challenges.
Please, gentleman right next. Yeah.
Where did you film these submarine scenes, and what challenges did you have with representing a small enclosed space like that?
Where did I shoot the submarine scene? Sorry. That was shot in Montreal. Galen Johnson, our production designer, just made some, you know, submarine segments. I forget how long it was, because there's an illusion in the movie that it's like 60 feet long, but I think it was actually something like 6 feet long or something like that. And no, it must have been more like 10, but whatever. 12, thank you. Galen's back there, 12. I like cozy spaces. I don't know how to light for really big, I wouldn't know how to shoot this room, for instance.
That really
you know?
shines through in the film, that, you know, you're so tight all the time. You feel, as a viewer, you almost feel the, you know, as part of that.
Well, it's one of the things Galen and I talked about beforehand. I just said I prefer small spaces anyway. For my movie Saddest Music in the World, I had by far the biggest budget possible. I hired a production designer, made really big sets, and then I would just go into the corner of that giant set and shoot a tiny little thing, and none of these giant, amazing sets even made it into the movie. So with Galen, he was worried about the small budget we had, and I said, well, if it's any reassurance, I prefer really tiny, little womb-like structures. I only know how to light by aiming one light, basically, into the center and just letting it grade off into shadows anyway. So I prefer sort of womb-like snugness and compositions and people gathered around themselves. So I'm sorry, I've forgotten some of your question, but it was in Montreal in a 12-foot long submarine section, which at one point we were going to open up to make 24 feet long and shoot as a cross section, but we ran out of time that day. And that was it, I guess.
Yes.
Thanks.
Go, please.
So, right here.
Yes.
You had mentioned that often, you know, people's viewing experience is impacted by what they ate for lunch, right? So do you think it's possible to reset that in the first 10, 15 minutes? And if so, you know, what are some strategies that you've learned? That
Oh, you mean just blow physical presence out of everyone's system and just override it, you mean?
Well, you know, because it's true. Like, you come in with your subjectivity, you're predisposed for a certain experience, and you can't have a completely objective viewing experience. You're coming in from a specific viewpoint.
Right.
But I just wonder if you've, you know, because I find that a challenge as a filmmaker. So how do you kind of bring people into the common space?
Yeah.
Can you? Have you figured out strategies for how to do that?
Gee, it's not like I've reached, you know, billions of people or anything like that. I guess, you know, you'd be better off putting that question to Steven Spielberg or something, who showed the dinosaur within the first 17 seconds or something. But I don't know. But it was funny. I put on. I presented a couple of my movies with live elements. My movie, My Winnipeg, I narrated live like an old school travelogue. And my movie, Brand Upon the Brain, had an orchestra, some Foley sound effects artists, a narrator, a castrato, and I don't know, like in a trained chihuahua or something like that, going, like just keeping things going. And that's when I learned, well, for one thing, the walkout ratio went down from my usual 85% to 0. And the live elements made me feel more like a showman. Especially when I was narrating My Winnipeg, I could sense if the energy was a little low, I could just lean into it a bit more. And if someone got up to leave, I could fix them with a stare saying, you better just be going to the bathroom, buddy. you know, okay, I'll sit down again, you know, and that sort of thing. So
there are some strategies right there. That's
exactly, yeah. You know, who needs scratch and sniff cards when you can just like glower at somebody? But then making the movie live kept up that feeling that I was a showman. You know, it's ridiculous. Here I am sitting here describing myself as a showman, but I wasn't just a filmmaker. it was constant reminder that there's an audience. And even though clearly I make movies that aren't for everybody, I am making them for an audience of some, like an imagined one. I was just wondering until Monday's world premiere who that audience was. But yeah, how do you keep people, how do you get people to forget the liver and onions they just ate? I don't know. You know, like you can just sort of hope that they watch. You worry about that when you're making a movie now, when people are watching on their laptops and checking their emails, that like, how are you going to keep people with a movie that's atmospheric mostly? Or like just how much, you know, if you do such things, how much more do you dial in plot than atmosphere with the way people watch movies now? And how long do you make your movie? Are you better off making a 4-minute movie or a feature, or, you know, I don't know. We're all in, the ground is shifting so much now, so I certainly don't have the answers. I just made the movie we wanted to make, and we even know it's at its running time at 2 hours and 11 minutes.
I think you called it a punishing length to me when we were inside the
I love
green
the
room.
movie, and we had every opportunity in the world to make it 75 minutes, but we just thought that whatever this movie's about, one of the things is just a surfeit of narrative, and it just had to be, like, too much narrative wasn't going to be enough, probably, and so we just had to make it too much, and just that if people were going to like it, they might like it but find it too long, and then maybe eventually come to like the fact it's too long. I remember the first, not to compare my movie to Vertigo, which is one of my favorite movies, but I remember the first time I saw it, I fell asleep and felt it was too long and was a little bit disappointed in it. First time I saw La Talente, same thing, and then I felt the need to rewatch it later. I would love it if people felt the need to rewatch my movie later. But I remember just loving it on its terms finally, and coming to it, and loving the fact that Vertigo had one extra act, and loving the fact that La Talente wasn't surreal in an easy way, in an obvious way, but worked on me very slowly, and then finally I came around on it. And why shouldn't people have to think about things? I don't want to make my movie seem like a homework assignment, or like you're going to be tested on film history afterwards or anything. But you know, if it's a little bit less than perfect as a first viewing experience, but you liked parts of it a lot, geez, I'm thrilled, you know, and then maybe you'll come back and like it even more someday, you know, so that's perfect for me. That's how my favorite movies have come to me, and how I've then had to come to them.
When and where is tonight's? Is it tonight's screening you have?
Tonight's screening, I don't know the exact time, but it's in Salt Lake City, a little later, I think. The special sleepy time edition of the movie. 9:45. The first one was the post-lunch, the post-casserole screening, and the post-pasta, and tonight's, yes.
All right. We're out of time.
We have to go out of time.
So,
I'm sorry, we
ladies
can
and
talk to you
gentlemen,
after.
Please join me in thanking Guy Maddin.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.